Hello everybody, welcome to the Big Man MTG YouTube channel. I am a rather large man with an equally large love for the game of Magic the Gathering. This is the first time you're seeing this channel. That would make perfect sense as this is the first video I'm uploading, and I thought what better way to get the ball rolling than starting it off with a deck tech around my personal favorite pet deck, Muldrotha the Gravetide. Now, I'm sure a few of you just shuddered at the mention of the name, as this deck is an absolute monster. I'm not going to say I am a perfect deck builder, but I do believe I built a pretty strong deck here. So, if you are someone who is looking to upgrade your Muldrotha deck, or just looking for a strong graveyard recursion themed deck, or if you just want to hang out and see the thought process behind, what somebody else's deck building, stick around. I'm sure you're going to enjoy the video. So, let's talk a little bit more about Muldrotha. She's a 3 mana, black, green, blue, so we get to play in our Sultai colors, and is a 6/6 elemental avatar. So not only is she a big body, but her ability is going to allow us to use our graveyard to the fullest in a very heavy self-mill kind of deck. Now, she allows us to play a land and cast a permanent of each type from our graveyard each turn, only during our turns. So that means we get to play a creature, an artifact, enchantment, battles, planeswalkers. And we can use the advantage of having creatures / enchantments with 2 types. So for example, an enchantment creature, we could choose to cast it as the enchantment side or cast it as a creature side and still be able to cast another enchantment or creature that turn. Now, let's get into the creatures of this deck. Starting with an Accursed Marauder, which for a very cheap cost of black and 1, when it enters, each player sacrifices a non-token creature of their choice. Now, 9 times out of 10, you're selecting this card, so you can send it off to the graveyard and use it again later on. And this also helps to either take out early commanders if they try and get them out early, or early combo pieces to help them set up for late game. So this is a really great card to help with that control aspect. Angel of Suffering is a bomb in this deck. Flying 5/3 that if damage will be dealt to you, prevent that much damage and mill twice that many cards. So this lets you essentially just put your pillow fort up, sit back, have your opponents swing at you, and mill you out more. You do have to be careful though, because I have seen it where opponent declares a big swing. I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever, I'll take it, and then boom, gets removed. And then now I'm just taking a bunch of damage. So it is a double-edged sword, definitely, but a huge card that'll help you fill up that graveyard a lot quicker. Birds of Paradise, a card that I think should be in every green deck, especially if you can get it turn 1, is ideal. Helps you ramp out. Is also a good flying blocker because this deck kind of struggles with the things that like to go high. 0/1, so you're saying that you're not going to be taking anything out, but you could help save some life points. Blood Artist is an absolute menace in this deck. Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain a life. Now, in a deck where I want to sacrifice my creatures to then use again later on, this card is going to help drain our opponents and keep our own life totals up high. Doughty Voidwalker, probably even more of a menace than Blood Artist. Shadow doesn't really matter because we never really attack with this creature, and we don't want it dying before we get to use its ability, because it says if a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. So we are now stopping other people from playing recursion, but then with those exile cards, we can tap and sack Doughty Voidwalker to choose one of them and cast it without paying its mana cost. So we get around both timing, and we could probably drop a huge bomb from their cards. Deathrite Shaman, really great early card to tap and exile target land from the graveyard to add 1 mana of any color. Usually you can get away with doing this yourself a few times, but with the amount of fetches I've been seeing played recently, usually I'm just taking things out of other people's graveyards. I'll admit I rarely ever use the other 2 abilities unless I'm really in a pinch and really need the health or damage. Displacer Kitten, MVP of the deck. That avoidance ability is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent you control, then return it to the battlefield. Now we get to flicker Muldrotha and reset what we've cast so far that turn. So for example, if I cast a creature, enchantment, and artifact up until that turn, I then play Displacer Kitten and then cast Planeswalker, I now get to flicker Muldrotha, and I'll be able to freely cast another creature, artifact, enchantment, and do it again when I keep flickering. So this really helps us later on, especially when you see we have a Lotus Petal in this deck, so a 0 mana artifact that'll flicker Muldrotha, sack for mana, recast a Lotus Petal, flicker Muldrotha, sack for mana, Easy way to get infinite mana, infinite sacks in this deck. Really strong piece for it. Eternal Witness, another really strong card that it allows us, whenever it enters, to return a target card from our graveyard to our hand. So this will help us get back those instant and sorceries that we can then recycle next turn by sacrificing Eternal Witness, recasting it, replay sorcery. There are a few little combos with her that allows me to have infinite turns, so she is a really nice piece in the deck. Fiend Artisan. Don't be fooled by this 1/1. When it enters, it'll probably be 5/5 or above. For 2 mana, pretty good, right? Not only does it enter as a big body, it also allows us to pay a hybrid green-black and X to tap and sack another creature, then search our library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield. So it also helps us grab our combo pieces. Also, this art is terrifying, and that's why I absolutely love this boy. He's really nice in this deck. Gilded Drake. This is one that probably not a lot of people are going to run. I just ran it recently because I picked it up with a few of my trading credit, and it's a card that I've always just wanted to play. So whenever it enters, we exchange control of Gilded Drake for target creature of your opponent's controls, or sacrifice Gilded Drake. So essentially, we're going to have this 3/3 enter. I'm going to take your creature. You can have the Drake, and I'm just going to enjoy having probably most likely a huge giant creature. I will take an Eldrazi any day of the week for this little 3/3 flyer. Really great card to stop your opponents and help you kind of get further in the game as well. Glen Elendra Archmage. When I put this in this deck, I wasn't too sure about her, but she has become an absolute unit in here. Now, flying, another help with us against our flying defense. But most importantly, we have blue, sacrifice Glen Elendra Archmage to counter target non-creature spell. And it has persist, so when it does die that first time with no -1/-1 counters, she's going to come back with a -1/-1 counter and help us, kind of control the game. No more non-creature spells can be hitting the board. And when we have a Great Henge out, which is in this deck, she's going to enter with that -1/-1. It'll put a +1/+1, which will cancel each other out, and they both go bye-bye. And then we can reuse her ability over and over again to control the non-creature spells coming onto the battlefield. Haywire Might. I love this card so much in this deck. Whenever it dies, you're gaining 2 life, so it's helping us with life gain. But most importantly, we pay a green, sack Haywire Might, and exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. This is helping us pop early game, Soul Rings, Signets, anything that helps us kind of catch up or really put our opponents behind. Hermit Druid. I have a love-hate relationship with this human druid. This hippie looking bastard has cost me games, but he has also won me games. Now, his ability of green, tap, and reveal cards on the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card. You put that card in your hand and all other cards revealed this way into your graveyard. I'm telling you, you're either going to hit 3 cards or 70. There's no in between with this guy. But he can fill up your graveyard really quick and help you find those combo pieces needed to finish off a game. Junji, the Midnight Sky, legendary dragon spirit. He's a flying menace. He is absolutely a menace in this deck. When Junji the Midnight Sky dies, you have to choose one of these 2 options. Each opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life. Rarely happens. I don't think I've ever once chosen that, because I want the second ability, where you put target non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose 2 life. It sucks, the 2 life. But when I could sacrifice this Junji to return, say, a Protein Hulk, and then sacrifice the Protein Hulk to go get more stuff, it sets off a huge part of our engine. So Junji is a really great card in this deck. Lotus Cobra. We run in this deck all our fetches. So with a landfall ability of whenever a land you control enters, add 1 mana of any color. This helps us to get going in the early run, especially when we have a 6 mana commander. Sometimes it's harder to get to. This little snake helps us to get there so much faster. Look at his little smile. Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. This bear is bodacious. Legendary creature, elemental bear. A little star. That's because its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. With a vigilance reach, and whenever she enters, you mill 4 cards, then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Now, if you have a full graveyard, and you pop this on the battlefield, you're going to put so many lands on the battlefield. Or if you scape shift beforehand, sacrifice all lands, get new lands, then play her, as she just helps so much in this deck, and again, helps us with our flying defense against reach. Marin of Clan Nel Toth. This is a card that, I'll be honest, it's close to being cut because it still has had really great games for me, but it's kind of a little too slow now. So whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. At the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. I just like the ability to, even if I don't have enough experience counters, I still kind of get a card back. So that's why she's still in the deck. But again, she's on the fence, maybe out soon. We'll see. Overlord of the Haunt Woods. This card, first off, beautiful art, terrifying. As a person who does not like bugs, it gives me the creeps. An enchantment creature. So I spoke a little bit on it earlier, where we could cast it as an enchantment or a creature and still have the other left over. Impending 4. Thank God it's here, because if it wasn't, I would not be able to remember it fully. So you can cast it for its impending cost, and it is with 4 time counters on it. And it's not going to be a creature until that last enchantment or time counter is removed. So at your end step, you remove time counter, then it eventually becomes a creature. But whenever it enters or attacks, you can create a tapped colorless land token named Everywhere that is every basic land type. This is just another card that's helping us mill out quicker, and if we get the Displacer kitten going, and we sometimes don't have a Muldrotha because she is a kill on site commander, it isn't always there, this helps us ramp back up in order to cast Muldrotha out again. Protein Hulk. As ugly as it looks, this is probably the best card in the deck, because when it dies, you search your library for any number of creature cards with total mana value of 6 or less, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle. This is going to help us get those big combo pieces we need, like Displacer Kitten, for example, or Glenalendra. Normally, if I have a sack outlet, I'd play this, go grab Junji, sacrifice Junji, bring this guy back, sacrifice him again, and just gets a little chain going. So this is a really good creature to have in this deck. Sakura Tribe Elder, the special art. Absolutely love Steve. Search your library for a land card after to sacrifice them. Search for a basic land card and put that card on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Really great early ramp piece that allows us to kind of help mitigate a little bit of damage with the block, and then sacrifice. What else can I say? Steve is the best. 6, absolutely awesome tree folk. Love this design. Reach. Whenever 6 attacks, mill 3 cards, and you may put a land card from among them into your hand. And as long as it's my turn, non-land permanent cards in my graveyard have retrace. So this helps me kind of get around Muldrotha's restrictions of 1 per turn by discarding lands to then cast something from my grave, which is really nice. Spellskite. This is a protection piece for Muldrotha because, as I mentioned, she is a kill-on-site commander. For a Phyrexian blue, so either you pay a blue mana or pay 2 life, you get to change the target of target spell or ability to Spellskite. So I'm usually eating a Source of Plowshare, Path to Exile, Beast Within, Assassin's Trophy. This thing has absolutely munched every removal spell in the game, and we love Spellskite. Spore Frog. This is probably one of the only creatures that have survived since the first iteration of this deck. Sacrificing Spore Frog lets you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn, which, if you can get it out every turn cycle, once each turn cycle you're preventing somebody's damage, it's going to help protect your life totals, and is just a great guy all around. Stitcher Supplier, probably besides Birds of Paradise, my favorite 1-drop in this deck. Whenever Stitcher Supplier enters, you mill 3 cards, also when she dies. So, in a deck where I want things to die or go to the graveyard, this is great. This is about 6 cards for 1, and she's reusable, so she'll be out over and over again to help us mill our deck quick. I know a lot of you are going to look at this and go, oh my god, you're disgusting. Guess what? I am. I don't care. At the beginning of each end step, you put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control with a creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Then whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, you create a 1/1 black slug creature token. Now, when I first saw this card, I did not realize that it said each end step, and I thought it said your end step, so I was like, oh, this card's okay, but not crazy. If this gets back around to you, effectively your opponent's creatures have -4/-4, and most of them are going to be dying and making a lot of slugs that you can then use as sacrifice fodder or blocking. It's just, Toxrill is so strong. So disgusting, but so strong. Underrealm Lich. This card helps us, if we start emptying out our library, Because if you would draw a card, instead you look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Paying 4 life will also help protect them as it taps them and makes them indestructible. But this gets around us ever having to draw a card again. So if our library empties out, we have this, I guess. It kind of helps keeps us in the game. And if you pair this like Angel of Suffering, you're not going to lose the game. It also combos really well with Sylvan Library, as you know, due to the writing on Sylvan Library, it's you lose 4 life for each card not put back for 2. That was a horrible explanation of Sylvan Library. But I never draw those cards, so I never have to take the damage, and I get to look at the top 9 instead. So this is a really awesome card to have. Urborg Lurgoyf has kicker, both 2 kickers. So kicker for blue or black, so you can choose to either pay blue, either black, or blue and black. And you mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. So usually this is a 4 mana mill 6, which is really awesome in our deck. And Urborg Lurgoyf's power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So similar to Fiend Artisan, this thing is usually a pretty big creature just to have on board, and it comes with a really great mill effect. Uro of Titan of Nature's Wrath. This card is terrifying. It reminds me of those, I don't remember what they're called from Elden Ring, but they're just these giant things that, When Uro enters, sacrifice it unless it escaped, which usually in this deck, I'm not really going to be escaping it unless I really have cards in the graveyard that I don't need, because whenever he enters or attacks, you gain 3 life, draw a card, and you can put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So drawing, gaining life, and ramping, really great effects for this deck that we can use each turn. White of the Reliquary. This card, when I first saw it, wasn't sure if it was going to make the deck, but it has been an absolute powerhouse. Vigilance, so it's never going to tap. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. So we have a lot of effects like that really just buff our creatures and make them big. But we could tap and sacrifice another creature to search our library for any land card and put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So there are a lot of lands in this deck that are important to have on the battlefield, so this guy really helps us get those lands going. Now I'm going to get into the instants and sorceries in this deck. There aren't many, as it is a more permanent base deck, but they are still very powerful and help us get to our end goal quicker. Buried Alive. This is a sorcery which lets you search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. You've already seen how important the creatures are to this deck, so being able to put them into the graveyard and have access to them is a huge way to get us forward in the game. Demonic Tutor, another way to search out combo pieces, not just creatures, it can get us anything. So it can help us get the artifacts or the enchantments that we need to try and finish out the game. You just search for 1 card, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Finale of Eternity. This one is really fun in this deck. For 2 black and X, you destroy up to 3 target creatures with toughness X or less. So you can use this in the early game to get rid of a few problems. You can use it in the late game, as you see that the X is 10 or more. You can return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you're at that point where you're able to put 10 into X, you're likely very deep into the game, and your graveyard should be pretty full at this point. This allows us to just slam our creatures on from the graveyard, kind of get our combos going, or just get a huge value of resources all at once. Really great card to help deal with your opponents as well. Genesis Wave, another great X spell. For 3 green and X, you reveal the top X cards of your library, and you can put any number of permanent cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then all cards that weren't put on the battlefield into your graveyard. So this is awesome, because we can go and get all the permanents, because, 4 out of every 5 cards in this deck are permanents, if not more. So we're usually slamming down a big number of cards, as well as cards that we don't need right away, we can put into our graveyard for later use. Really good card to help us get going. Life from the Loam. One of my favorite cards to have early game, because you cast it even if there are no land cards in the graveyard. Just it being in the graveyard and being able to dredge 3, so milling 3 to put it back in your hand instead of drawing, is huge to get the ball rolling. It can help us fix our mana. It can help us if we're mana screwed. Really good card to get a few more extra cards at the top of the deck. Scape Shift. I think I mentioned this with Lumber earlier. Absolutely awesome card. You sacrifice any number of lands. Let's say you toss 8 lands to the graveyard from the field. Search your library for up to that many land cards and put them onto the battlefield. Tap, then shuffle. This can help us get those important land cards that help us get more mana. It can help us, fill our graveyard a bit more. So when our Lumber hits, she's now returning at least 8 lands, really ramping us out. I've been able to do that turn 5 and get 18 lands on the battlefield. So this card is definitely a heavy hitter in this deck. Even if you're not running the Lumber combo, I still think this is great to help you find those utility lands to help you in the game. Temporal Manipulation. Take an extra turn card, or take an extra turn after this one with this card. With Eternal Witness and enough mana, and a way to sacrifice Eternal Witness and then cast it, this is an infinite loop to get infinite turns, and you just start playing Solitaire with yourself. There was a point where this card was Time Warp, but due to the fact me getting Deflecting swatted away because Time Warp targets player, I decided to go with this one because there's no chance for them to take it away from me. Counter it, sure. You're not taking my extra turn. I don't like sharing. And the last sorcery we have is Windfall. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. With playing a lot like low to the ground cards in this deck, we could easily Windfall turn 2 while also having our field, full of artifacts, enchantments. So being able to discard our hand and likely draw 5 to 6 cards both fills our graveyard and gets us more fuel in the hand to continue going. Really great way to start a game, or even mid-game to kind of pick up a bunch of cards and fill up that graveyard. Starting with instance, we have a Cabal Ritual. For black and 1, add 3 black mana, but that threshold of adding 5 black mana if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard really is a boost to the deck, because usually turn 3 or 4, I'm going to have at least that, so this is to help us really with our mana ramp and put out a pretty big spell. Constant Mists. This one has been awesome. This is our Fog in the deck. To buy back, you sacrifice a land, which with this deck, lands, being sacrificed aren't a big problem, because we can just, bring them or play them back again with Muldrotha. We prevent all combat damage that we've dealt this turn. So this is, a pretty good Fog that's reusable in our deck that we can help, prevent some boards from destroying our day. Cyclonic Rift. Again, this is again, I don't know what I'm saying again, but this is a card that I think if you have the budget should be in a blue deck. This is a game finisher. Returning target non-land permanent to you don't control to its owner's hand, but overloading it to say each is just it's a one-way board wipe, disgusting card. You should run it. Also, not the worst early game card to kind of pick off or return a combo piece to hand. So good in the early game, but devastating in the late. Entomb, we saw with Buried Alive earlier. This is essentially that, but just for any card. So this is like a little mix between Demonic Tutor and Buried Alive, where for 1 black mana, we search our library for a card and just toss it into the graveyard. So this is really great. This is essentially, for us, a 1 mana instant Demonic Tutor. Really, we can then use that card that we put into the graveyard, typically right away, or save it for later. Fierce Guardianship. If you control a commander, you can cast a spell without paying his mana cost. It is a part of the 5-color free commander. I don't know what you call those cards. Commander costs? Which, sure. But counter target non-creature spell. I've mentioned that Muldrotha is a kill on-site commander, so having this there to then protect our commander is really big. We're going to avoid those Source of Plowshares, Path to Exile, Beast Within, Assassin's Trophy. God, there's so much removal in this game. So this will help us kind of protect our commander a little bit. This also helps protect our, not just our commander, but our other permanents, because, people can exile our combo pieces. So this is going to help us gain that hexproof and indestructible to make sure that they can't be targeted removal. It is a rough day when a farewell gets cast, but you don't see too much of it. So Heroic Intervention is really great and reusable again with Eternal Witness. Each instant or sorcery you see, you can think of as returnable with Eternal Witness to get multiple uses out of them. Mana Drain. Counter target spell. At the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of colorless equal to that spell's mana value. Casting this turn 3 on a 4 mana spell is been the most effective for me so far, as I can then cast Muldrotha the next turn. Really strong. Also, again, just depriving your opponents of resources while jettisoning you ahead. Really good card. Realms Uncharted. This is my favorite vibe check at the table, because this now means that your opponents need to make some tough decisions. Searching your library for 4 land cards with different names and revealing them with your non-basics, you're never gonna have an issue with it. Then an opponent chooses 2 of those cards, you put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand, then shuffle. Now, the 4 cards that I always love going to get with this, Cabal Coffers and Herbivore Tomb of Yawgmoth, self-explanatory, they make an insane amount of mana. Shifting Woodland, and then either a Mazavith sometimes, but more than likely it's going to be an Echoing Deeps. Because now you have to think, if you put, Echoing Deeps is able to copy lands that are put into the graveyard, so if they put, my Cabal Coffers into the graveyard, I play the Echoing Deeps as Cabal Coffers, play Cabal Coffers next turn. We're making an insane amount of mana that is really just pushing us forward in the game. As well as, the Shifting Woodland, I can make a copy of any permanent in my graveyard. So this is a really good card to then kind of, just make sure your opponents are paying attention in the game. So our artifacts in this deck are a lot of catalysts for our combos. And you see a great example right here with Altar of Dementia, which allows us to sacrifice a creature, which, again, we're getting that creature dying, so that's really great for a few of our effects. But also, target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Now, there's a bit of a complicated combo with Muldrotha, that if I have the Altar of Dementia, Muldrotha, Displacer, Kitten, and Lotus Petal, Kaya's Gas Form, I can do an infinite loop where I can mill out all of my opponents, or I can mill as many cards as I want from myself. So this is a really great card to have just for even self-mill, or, milling your opponents. Another way to win the game. Arcane Signet. I feel like a lot of these artifacts, I'm not going to have to explain why they're in the deck. Arcane Signet, it just adds 1 mana of any color to your commander's color identity. Good little bit of mana ramp. Birthing Pod. Disgusting in the deck. For, 1 in a Phyrexian green, so either green or 2 life. You tap, sack a creature, and then search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value. Which, in this case, has to be exactly +1. So if you sacrifice a 3 mana creature, you have to go get a 4. But our deck kind of staircases up in mana value, so it's a really great option to go and get either a bomb or a card that's desperately needed. Very good card for Muldrotha, as we can also recur those creatures that we sacrifice. Crucible of Worlds. When Muldrotha is not in play, but we still have lands in the graveyard, it doesn't mean that they're there forever. This card's just going to allow us to play lands from our graveyard. If you have any kind of graveyard recursion deck, no matter what colors, this should be in, as you can get those lands back that you're kind of sending to the grave. Lightning Greaves. Protection piece for the commander. As a commander is the kill on sight, we want to make sure that we have her protected at all times, and this is a great way to do it. Also just a cheap artifact from Grave, so really fun. Not fun, just good card. Lotus Petal, I talked about this earlier. It is a catalyst for a Displacer Kitten combo to get infinite mana, and just infinite, we can get infinite sacks, infinite casts. If I ever wanted to do like a kind of like a storm thing in this deck, this would be a way to get that going. But again, just gets us going in the early game. Really good card to kind of both combo off and ramp us up to catch up if we're behind. Mana Vault, speaking of ramping up, this is the poor man's Mana Crypt. Ever since Mana Crypt's been banned, I needed a replacement, and this fit that perfectly, as it kind of is there, just kind of help us cast Muldrotha earlier, get that going. Usually, I'm not going to be paying that 4 mana to untap it. I'll just eat the 1 damage every turn, but that 3 colorless is really nice. Matzalantli, which I can never pronounce or remember it off the top of my head, the Great Door, a legendary artifact that was released in Ixalan, the new Ixalan. Tap, draw a card, then discard a card. So with this card, we're both fueling our hand and our graveyard at the same time. Really awesome, but we're more focused on that second ability that you can pay for and tap and transform Matzalantli, the Great Door, and activate only their 4 more permanent types cards among permanents in your graveyard. Shows you all of them here. Usually not an issue getting that flipped. But when it does flip, it flips into the Core, a legendary land with Fathomless Descent, which I still can't believe that they print something like this. I find it, it's so just disgusting. Tapping and adding X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. I'll tell you a little secret. This card wants permanents in the graveyard. So when we're tapping this for, 60 green, our Genesis Waves, our Finale of Eternities, our Protein Hulks are easier to cast. Like, this is just, it helps us so much. And it's so, for what it, the cost is, really easy to get this going and really kind of turn the game in our favor. Sorry. Mesmeric Orb. This card affects, both us and our opponents. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. This helps us fill our graveyard and helps reduce our opponent's resources, which if you pair this with like a Douthie Voidwalker, you're getting so many cards that you can now cast for free. This is just a great card for this deck. Palantir of Orthanc. I bet you any money it's hard to read that. Good thing we have a description right here. Because I always forget too when I play it, because it mostly ends up being a Scry 2 draw card, because no one wants to let you mill. At the beginning of your end step, put an influence counter on Palantir of Orthanc and Scry 2. Then, target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards, so if there's ever the opportunity where you have 4 on it, they say, no, don't draw a card, mill 4. You're going to mill those 4, and they're going to take damage equal to the total mana value of those cards. But in Muldrotha, your graveyard's kind of like your hand, so unless your opponent isn't paying attention, they're more than likely just going to have you draw a card. But still good just to kind of have it there for a bit of pressure, and it looks cool, don't get me wrong, but like, we got to figure that text out. Phyrexian Altar, MVP of the deck. Sacrificing a creature to add 1 mana of any color. It's helping us ramp. But more importantly, you'll see, I think in the next couple cards here, there is a great hench in this deck. Paired with Glenalendra, like I spoke about earlier, it will give us infinite mana. Because we sacrifice the Glenalendra for mana. We then have her persist, so she comes back with a -1/-1. Great hench puts a 1/1 counter, which slaps away both counters. We draw a card, so I guess technically not infinite, because we could end up, drawing out. But like this, it just gets so many of our synergies running. Like, this is a huge part of our engine. Soul Ring. If I need to explain why this is in a deck, you might be new. So hey, add 2 colorless mana for 1. You get an instant return on it. Really good card. The Great Henge. Got the Lord of the Rings art. Love this art. Love the card. Spells cost X less, where X is the greatest power among creature you control, which for a 9-drop, having anything reduced is really nice. Most of the time with our creatures that add like the +1/+1 for creatures in graveyard, we usually have 7 power on board, which means this is now cost 2 green, which we pretty much instantly get back with you being able to tap it for 2 green and then gain 2 life. And now whenever a non-token creature enters, you buff it and draw a card. Like, being able to ramp, gain life, buff, and draw all off of 1 card, this is a powerhouse card. If you have the budget, I highly suggest putting this in your decks, in your green decks, obviously. Let's finish off the non-land permanents with our enchantments, and we're going to start here with an absolute bomb. Animate Dead. Enchant creature card in the graveyard. Whenever Animate Dead enters, if it's on the battlefield, it loses enchant creature card in the graveyard, and gains enchant creature card put onto the battlefield with Animate Dead. That's not confusing. Essentially, it's just allowing you to put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield with this enchantment aura on it. It gets -1/-0. So, for the 1 black and 1, if we can get back like a Protein Hulk, a Junji, like, this is just huge value for what it is, and it's going to be reusable once that creature dies, and this goes back to the graveyard. Eaten by Piranhas. This has been one of my favorite enchants in the deck. Kind of similar to Oko's +1 ability of making something an elk and losing its abilities. This one does something very similar, where it has Flash, which if it's in the graveyard, not going to really matter that Flash, but if it's in hand, awesome. Allows you to enchant creature with that enchanted creature losing abilities, and is a black skeleton creature with base power and toughness 1/1. So see, it loses all the colors, card types, and creature types. This is really awesome to either disrupt someone's commander or one of their combo pieces. Just a really fun card for control in the deck. Grave Pact. This one is a heavy hitter. We're sacrificing a lot of creatures. A lot of our creatures are dying. So whenever those creatures die, each opponent sacrifices, each other player sacrifices a creature of their choice. We are now making you sacrifice along with us. So if we're able to, cycle a sack a couple times, cycle a sack a couple of times, we're now removing a large portion of people's boards. Usually it's going to be all their board, but kind of rough against token decks. But this is a very good control piece to keep our opponents in check. Kaya's Ghost Form, mentioned earlier in the little bit of the convoluted combo. This is a little bit of protection on our commander, because whenever it is enchanted permanent dies or is put into exile, you return that card to the battlefield under your control. Now, where we can cast this every time it does happen, it kind of helps us keep Muldrotha around. Our kill on-site commander becomes a little less hard to kill. Ristic Study. Boo. I know if you were just there. Boo. But this is a really helpful card to help us, kind of keep our components in check by having them pay 1 every time they cast a spell or we draw a card. This is just kind of fueling the hand, and it's just an enchantment to cast from graveyard. Seal of Removal. This one is this is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck because it just kind of, when it's on the board, it is a huge vibe check. Either you're going to force me to use it, or you're going to sit there and not do anything because you're scared of it. For a 1 blue, it's an enchantment. You sacrifice it, return target creature to its owner's hand. Again, this is a piece that people aren't going to mess with you because you might be able to just kind of pop something back to their hand. Really good control piece. Sylvan Library. This is a green card that allows you at the beginning of your draw step to draw 2 additional cards. Then, if you choose 2 of those cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards, you pay 4 life or put it back on top of your library. Now, with the Underrealm Lich allowing us to not draw, but instead look at the top cards, it'll still allow us to do the 3 quote-unquote draws, but because we never drew any cards, we don't have to pay life. So again, we get to look at 9 cards at every upkeep and put 6 into the graveyard, 3 into our hand. Really good card, even without Underrealm Lich. This just helps you find those pieces you need a lot quicker. The Meat Hook Massacre. One of the really only big-ish board wipes in the deck. Another X spell, so if we're able to really, get our mana going, usually you don't need that much because this is going to give every creature -X when it enters. And then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life. So again, it's kind of, changing life totals. When we have a turn where we can, sack a creature as many times as we need, we're going to drain our opponents until they have no life left to live. That sounded a lot darker than I meant it to be, but you know what I meant. And then we're just getting a little bit of added bonus whenever their things are dying. We're going to gain some life. Really good card. This is unfortunately, it's gone down quite a bit in price. I bought mine at 90 Canadian, but hey, it's still up there. Still a great card to have. So, last thing to talk about in the deck is the land base. And for the most part, there's not too much to talk about. A lot of it is just, your mana fixing. We have our fetches, shocks, triomes. We have an Ancient Tomb here. You see that taps for 2 colorless, but it deals 2 damage to you. So I'm going to avoid just kind of like the regular lands and kind of go more towards the utility. So if I skip through real quick, first one here, Boseiju Who Endures. The channel lands from Kamigawa was fantastic for this deck. Because not only are you going to be able to use a channel ability that has you discard the card to then do its effect, you can then play the land after the fact. It's just good synergy for the deck. So this one's going to allow you to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. Now, usually I'm using it for the artifact or enchantment, but with how powerful lands have become, that non-basic land destruction is actually a pretty good option to pop, say, a Nykthos Shrine of Nyx, or a Urborg to a Yawgmoth. So this is really good utility land that's useful in hand and in the graves, which is really good. Then player does search for a land card with a basic land type put on the battlefield, so you can help them get their triomes or their shocks, but I'd rather have them have that than have the really, good cost utility land. Cabal Coffers, paying 2 to tap for black for each swamp we control. When we have Urborg to a Yawgmoth and every land is considered a swamp, this really helps us kind of get that mana flowing. Really nice, really good. Command Beacon. This is a card that says command attacks is theft, and you don't need to pay it anymore. So essentially what happens is we play this land, we sack, we put our commander into our hand, cast from hand, play this land out of the grave, so we've never actually cast it from the command zone. So we're never going to have to worry about commander attacks unless this gets exiled. Echoing Deeps. Actually, let me get back to it. Echoing Deeps, really good card because if you can have it enter as a copy of any land card in your graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types. So we're getting our, even if our Cabal is in graveyard, we don't have a way to play it. We're still able to play or make this a copy of it. It's huge utility, a lot of versatility of what it can be too. It can also help us mana fix. It's a really good card for us. Also, really funky art. I think that's supposed to be like a Diplodocus on some pillars, but yeah, really, really cool card. Lotus Field. This is just, it enters tapped. You get to sack 2 lands, but it does add 3 mana of any one color. You know, with our lands being resources that we can use again after they're gone, it really helps us kind of fix our land situation. Mazerith, a great land to help us pillow fort, as we can untap a target attacking creature, prevent all combat damage that we dealt to and by that creature this turn. So, you know, we don't have to worry about the big, big dumb idiots just coming swinging at us. We just kind of tap, put it out of combat, bing bang boom. Fetch land. Otawara, another channel land. This will help us bounce something to hand that may be a problem on the field at the time. Cost 1 less to activate for each legendary creature, so sometimes we can pay it for a single blue, but still, even 4 mana to do that, to kind of help stop somebody's progression. Really good card for the deck. Shifting Woodland, I talked about this earlier, that Delirium cost. It becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. Activated, there are only 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. So we saw that similar to the Matson Lotley. It's looking for card types in the graveyard, which we usually have. So this can become, a Junji. It could become a Protein Hulk. It's just really good versatility to be able to bring a card or become a permanent in our graveyard when we need it. Strip Mine. Yes, I am a horrible person, but just tapping, sacking, destroying target land with how valuable lands are. Like I said earlier with the Boseiju, this is just to help kind of keep our opponents in check. I try not to continuously loop Strip Mine if I don't have to, because I think it's evil, but if it's there if I need it. Another channel land, it lets us mill 3 cards and return a creature card or a planeswalker card from my graveyard to my hand. So if I don't have access to Muldrotha but need something in my grave, this will help me bring it back and be able to use it again. Urborg, each land is a swamp in addition to its other land types. This helps us mana fix and use our Cabal coffers to the fullest. And I believe this is the last land in the deck, Urza Saga. Definitely has kind of not been as big of a factor since the Jeweled Lotus mana crypt bans. But, I mean, still, taps makes some mana on the first lore counter. Second one, I hardly ever use that because it's a creature token. If I guess I need it in a pinch, it'd be nice. But 3 is search your library for an artifact card with mana value cost 0 or 1. That's still going to help us go get our Lotus Petal or Soul Ring and just kind of help us ramp out a little bit. Last one here. Each land is a force in addition to other types via the Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. Just some more mana fixing. It's a card that might be on the way out because I find it also helps opponents. It helps opponents. It can't help opponents more than it helps me. So it's just a little thought there what might be on its way out. Our Triome. And that is it for the lands. And I guess that's it for the deck. This is my first video, so I'm not sure exactly how it went. I'm not sure if you guys enjoyed it, but I hope that you did get a little bit of an insight into how I go around my deck building, why I seek value in cards, and if this does help you with your Muldrotha build, or even just like being able to bring like the way I think into other deck builds and help you there. I'm happy for you. That'd be real nice. If you, I'm gonna say it again. I'm not a this perfect deck builder. I definitely think there are people out there who can make it better than me. But, if you have any, suggestions for cards to put in, or if you think that there are cards that, make sense, let me know in the comments. This is, again, the first video, so it's definitely a learning process. I'm sure this isn't going to be the best edited thing. But, we're going to see where we go. If I want to keep continuing this, I have 20 plus decks that I could run through my thought process. They all kind of run different themes. I can maybe, if you go check out my Moxfield page, if I bring it up here, my decks built. You see, I have 27 built. I kind of put them all on here at once. These are all completed decks, a bunch of very different colors, themes. Obviously, this doesn't really show the name of the deck, but you could go on here, use this link, not that link, but Big Man Turge on Moxfield. You can take a look at my decks. Maybe let me know what you'd want to see moving forward. If you made it to this part, thank you. That's awesome. I hope that you really enjoyed the video, and this is something I can kind of keep doing in the future to kind of share my love of the game with other people. All right, this has been Big Man signing off.